Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. I'm Liz Bridgewater, the Director of Outreach at Climate Action Now, and one of many people who work to bring this action party to you today. It will be just a few moments while people continue to gather. If you're feeling up for it, please also share your video so we can all see each other today. We will be recording this action party, and it will be available publicly online. If you do not wish to appear in any shared content, please keep your camera off. We'll send out a recording tomorrow. For anyone joining in who was present at the action party last week, thank you for joining in again today so we can get this bill across the finish line together. And congratulations are in order because last week the Packaging Reduction and Recycling Infrastructure Act passed in the Senate with thanks to your outreach. Now it just needs to pass in the Assembly, which is why we're gathered here today. If this is your first ever action party, let me give you a quick overview. An action party like this is an opportunity to learn about important environmental issues from people who are experts in their fields. In the course of the same hour, we will use the Climate Action Now app to take action together. The Climate Action Now app makes it easy to send well-researched, personalized messages to political decision makers. To show you why it's so easy to take action with the Climate Action Now app, I'll share my screen for just a moment. All right, so this is an example action like the ones that you'll have access to tonight. It only takes 3 touches to take an action. First, you touch Do It Now. Because the app has your address, it automatically knows who your state officials are. Then you just choose how you want to contact the decision maker that you're reaching out to, either by calling or emailing them. Then you just have to hit send, and you've taken an action. In addition to sending emails this afternoon, we'll also have designated time for you to call your officials. As you take actions, you're going to earn points. When you earn enough points, Climate Action Now plants a real tree on your behalf. So far, Climate Action Now has planted over 400,000 trees together. To get you started with taking action today, I'm going to turn the spotlight over to Kaylee Beam, Director of Content at Climate Action Now. Over to you, Kaylee.
All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Kaylee Beam, Climate Action Now's Director of Content. Last week, like Liz said, we helped get the Packaging Reduction and Recycling Infrastructure Act through the Senate, so today's event features all new actions targeting the Assembly. We'll be using the Climate Action Now app to reach out to Speaker Hasty, our own representative, and other key Assembly members to get this bill over the finish line. So let me show you what you need to do to get into today's campaign. So I'm just going to share my screen really quick. Some of you are already in there. I can see the tracker already ticking up. If you've attended one of our action parties before, you already know what to do, but if this is your first time attending, let me introduce you to our goal tracker. So on the left side, we have this cool little globe, which will fill in and iterate as we take action here today. On the right side is the QR code, which is what you're going to scan to get into the app. So go ahead and take out your phones or tablets, open up your camera app, and point it right at the QR code box on the right side of the screen, under where it says Current Action. As you're pointing your camera at the QR code, a little bubble that says Climate Action Now should appear. Once it does, all you need to do is tap on it. Now, if you don't have the app already, tapping that bubble will take you to the App Store, where you can download it for free. And then once you have the app, all you need to do is follow the prompts to sign up, and it will take you right to the End Plastic Pollution campaign, which is where you want to be for today. So I'll give everyone a moment to get in there. And if it's not working for you, don't worry. You can also go to your phone browser and type in the link that's highlighted directly under the QR code, right where it says canapp/PRIA2025. Just like the QR code, this link will take you to the campaign if you have the app, or to the App Store to download if you don't. And if you're still having trouble, it's okay. The campaign will still be open until the end of the legislative session, and we'll share detailed instructions on how to access it in our event follow-up email. And just one last thing, we will be putting up a slide with phone numbers and call scripts later in the event, so everyone can participate regardless of whether you have the app or not. So just hang tight if that's you. We want everyone to have the opportunity to take action today. Our current goal is to hit 250 actions by the end of the hour, which I think we can definitely do. Even better, a little bird told me that our moderator will share a funny and/or embarrassing anecdote from the Capitol for every 500 actions we take. So let's make sure we get there. Okay, that's everything from me. Back to you, Liz.
Thanks so much, Kaylee. Finally, a special thanks to our lead planning partner and moderator this afternoon, Alexis Goldsmith. Alexis is the National Organizing Director for Beyond Plastics and is a principal organizer on the New York is Not Disposable campaign to pass the Packaging Reduction and Recycling Infrastructure Act and the Bigger, Better Bottle Bill. Before we learn from our speakers, Alexis is going to talk about this landmark bill and what's at stake. As you hear from Alexis and our speakers, please share any questions you have into the chat. Over to you, Alexis.
Thank you, Liz and Kaylee, and thank you so much for organizing this on a dime and helping us get this bill over the finish line. Climate Action Now has been working with us for 3 years now on this bill, so you've been with us from the start, and we really appreciate your help and everything you do to empower people to take action and feel connected to each other while they take action. So I hope everyone's having a great day. It's really hot today. I haven't turned on my air conditioning, so I'm like sweating bullets. But I'm also sweating because the stakes are really high right now. I spent the entire day in Albany yesterday with Judith, and I was also joined by Sharon Levine of Rise St. James and her cohort, Josephine Obrey, also of Rise St. James. I was also joined by Monique Fitzgerald and her aunt, Hannah, of the Brookhaven Landfill Action and Remediation Group in Long Island. So I'm going to tell you about how our day went yesterday and what we learned while we were there. But first, I want to talk about the actions we're taking today. So as was said, the bill passed the Senate. Yay! So we don't need to focus on the Senate. We are all eyes on the Assembly. And it is intense. So today we're going to be calling our own Assembly members, even if they're a Republican, and asking them to vote yes on this bill. And please note when you call your Assembly member, if they commit to voting yes, or if they waver, say maybe, or if they say they're voting no. And if you get that intel, if you get that answer, please send it to me, because we are hitting refresh on the vote count just about every hour to prove to the Assembly Speaker, Carl Hastie, that we have the votes to get the bill to the floor. So we'll be calling our own Assembly member, and then we'll be calling Carl Hastie himself, the Assembly Speaker. He is the man that decides if this bill gets to the floor. He can decide to put it on the committee agenda and get it moving and get it to the floor in one day if he wants to, but the bill has been stalled in the Ways and Means Committee for weeks. So just a refresher on where we're at, the bill has to clear certain committees. In the Assembly, it's cleared the NCON committee, which is the sponsors committee, Assemblymember Glick, and it's cleared the Codes committee. It's now sitting in Ways and Means, which is chaired by Assemblymember Pretlow. And then it has to go to Rules. If it gets to Rules, it will get to the floor. But first we have to get it out of Ways and Means. And the way it works in Albany is the Speaker actually decides what gets put on the committee agenda. The committee chair does have some power, but ultimately it's up to the Speaker if it moves. And the Speaker is taking a pulse check from his members in the majority to see if he's got the votes to pass it. So that's why we're calling our own Assembly members. We're asking our Assembly members to vote yes and to talk to Hastie to get this bill moving out of committee and get it to the floor. Session has been extended in the Assembly, so it is going, it was supposed to end next Thursday, the 12th, but I've heard it's going to the 17th, perhaps even the 18th, but we're not taking a single day for granted because there's only so much debate time, and this bill is going to be a 5-hour debate on the floor. That's where we're at. You'll be calling your own Assembly member, calling Hastie, and then you'll also be calling Assembly member Mikhail Salaj. She is the chair of the Black, Hispanic, Puerto Rican, and Asian American Caucus. And the reason we are calling her is because the industry, the petrochemical industry, is focusing on Black members of the caucus and scaring them off the bill with lies about the bill will increase consumer prices or that the bill will take food off the shelves, which are completely unfounded statements, but they are sowing division in this powerful caucus. And Michaëlle Solage can be a decisive player in this fight. So we need her on the side of environmental justice and consumer protections and not the side of the industry. So we'll be calling her to urge her to support the bill and let it move and support the bill and lead the caucus in letting the bill move. We'll also be emailing every member of the majority except some of our most staunch supporters like Glick and Kellis. So fewer emails today, but the calls are really important. Okay, so that's the actions we're taking, and we're already at 124. Thank you all. So where we're at, so yesterday while I was in Albany with Sharon Levine and Monique Fitzgerald and their friends, we met first with some members of the caucus off the floor. We met with Assembly Member Kwani O'Farrow, who is new, and Jonathan Rivera. They both said they're co-sponsoring the bill, but they didn't explicitly say they'd vote yes, but it was positive. And then we met with Assembly Member Monique Chandler Waterman of Brooklyn, who is not supporting the bill, but we are hoping to get her to a yes. So if you're an organization in Brooklyn, reach out to Monique Chandler Waterman and urge her to support this bill. Then we went over to the VIP area behind the assembly where the top assembly leaders' offices are. And this is like a secure area. You can't get in without an ID or an appointment. I've never been back there. So it was like, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm a mortal among gods here when we walked into that back room. And we met with Crystal People-Stokes, who is the assembly majority leader. And I thought the meeting was okay. She seemed to emphasize recycling a lot, but Sharon Levine really did amazing work talking about how the petrochemical industry is literally killing Black communities in the Gulf South, in Cancer Alley. She told these heart-wrenching stories about all the friends that she has lost to cancer and her friends who currently have cancer, and said they sometimes have 1, 2, 3 funerals a week because of this, because of the pollution from the plastics industry. So when you call, you can emphasize that we need to protect these communities as well as our communities here in New York, which Monique Fitzgerald with Blarg spoke to. So the Brookhaven landfill on Long Island is an ash landfill. It also accepts solid waste, but there are 4 incinerators on Long Island, and they send their ash to this landfill. For every 3 pounds of trash that are burned, there's 1 pound of ash, and it is highly, highly toxic. It's very concentrated with heavy metals. There's PFAS, and all the 16,000 chemicals in plastic can wind up in this ash or in the emissions from the incinerator. So they have been, Monique brought her Aunt Hannah, who is indigenous to Long Island and has been fighting this incinerator for 50 years. 50 years, half a century, she's been fighting this incinerator since before it was even sited in that community. And they told a heartbreaking story about how the community was redlined. The white residents of the community were encouraged to get bought out, to sell out because of racism. And it became a Black community. And then right after that, they cited the landfill there in this community. So this is environmental racism in action. And she also just emphasized that in order to really address this problem responsibly, they can't just close the landfill, they have to address the waste, because they can't close the landfill and then just send the waste to another community to be dumped. So Crystal People-Stokes did not indicate whether she would support the bill. She is on the bad bill. It is Love Canal. Yes, it's very toxic. So Crystal People-Stokes is on the bad bill. We urged her to talk to Hasty. She said we needed to talk to Hasty, but we weren't able to get an appointment with Hasty. Then we had a longer meeting with Assembly, the chair of the caucus, Mikhail Solage. She really did seem to listen. Woohoo, we made it 250. If we get to 500, I will tell an embarrassing story. Um, we talked to Mikhail Solage. She really listened to Monique and Sharon, but she was non-committal, and she's not on either bill. She was a co-sponsor of the good bill last year. She spoke at our rally last May. We're unclear about what's going on with her, but it is key to get her support because she chairs this powerful caucus. Then we met with Assembly Member Pretlow, who is the chair of the Ways and Means, and he gave us 45 minutes, which I was very surprised because he's a busy man. He genuinely listened to Sharon and to Monique and her aunt. And I thought that he started kind of hard to crack, but I think he came around in the end. And ultimately, his message to us was it's not his decision to put it on the Ways and Means agenda, which may or may not be true, but it would be great if he would put it on the agenda. However, we're not calling him today because we don't want to annoy him, but you will be emailing him. And then we met with members, with progressive members of the majority caucus, so a lot of members of the Black Hispanic caucus, and some other members to strategize how to get this done. And they really emphasized the division that is being done to the caucus right now by the industry. Industry is targeting the Black caucus to scare them off the bill. They said it's working, and we really need to be louder than the industry on this, on environmental justice and on consumer protections, particularly getting the toxics out of packaging. The industry is in there saying they can't take toxic chemicals out of packaging. They have to keep poisoning us, and that's just baloney. Organic, non-toxic baloney. No, it's very toxic baloney. So where we need is grassroots firepower, and that's why you're all here today, because we've got to address the plastic crisis. Plastic packaging will come to an end one day. I don't know if it's going to be in our lifetimes or not, but it's going to come to an end. The question is, how much damage is going to happen before that day comes? And we want to preserve our planet for future generations. We want to preserve our health. We want to preserve our children's health, our babies' health. And we want to hold companies responsible for their pollution, and that's what this bill will do. So thank you for making calls and emails today. And I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Reverend Catherine Bielke, who will be introduced by our friends here at Climate Action Now.
Thanks so much, Alexis. Reverend Catherine Bilkey is a graduate of Princeton Theological Seminary and served for a decade as pastor of a progressive congregation. But the moral and spiritual urgency of our current ecological crises prompted her to leave the pulpit and dedicate herself to effective environmental solutions. Believing that state and local action can spark meaningful change, Reverend Bilkey worked with municipalities navigating New York State's Climate Smarts Community Initiative before coming to Beyond Plastics. Thanks so much for being with us here today. Over to you, Reverend Bilkey.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you everyone who's here taking actions. This is really powerful to be able to do this all together. Yesterday, we heard from Sharon Levine speaking to the press in Albany on the Packaging Reduction and Recycling Infrastructure Act. And Sharon, as Alexis said, hails from a place that is now known as Cancer Alley, 85 miles along the Mississippi River in Louisiana, so named because of the disproportionate burden that petrochemical production has on her community. And these are the facilities that produce the plastics that we use in New York, around the country, and around the world, that produce those single-use items that we have in our hands sometimes for mere seconds. And when it's tossed away, will exist on this planet in some form far beyond our lifetimes. In my tradition, and which is also a theist tradition, we are both ordained in the Presbyterian Church USA, but also in the larger, broader Judeo-Christian tradition, God appoints prophets from amongst the people to show us the error of our ways and to bring us back in line with God's vision for humanity. And to me, Sharon is amongst the prophets of our time. She and others from her community have raised their voices for decades, warning us that these petrochemical companies traffic in disease and in death. Yesterday, she said, these polluters came in, these murderers came in to St. James Parish to wipe us out. They came in the 1960s, and we didn't know the effects of the pollution until we started getting sick. And then we started having funerals, sometimes 2 to 3 funerals a week. People who were dying of cancer and not knowing it was from the polluters. So these polluters are there and they are killing us. People are dying. She said, my friend Melvin is dying from colon cancer. My friend Jean died of liver cancer. How many more of us have to die because of these polluters? They want to make money off of our lives, and they're sacrificing us to make a profit. Friends, and with plastic production accelerating at such an alarming rate, expected to double by 2050, Sharon's words can only lead us to the conclusion that we will continue to see more sacrifice zones, more illness, more death, if this industry is allowed to keep expanding. In the 1940s, the German pastor Dietrich Bonhoeffer once said, we are not to simply bandage the wounds of victims beneath the wheels of injustice. We are to drive a spoke into the wheel itself. Maybe we could stop treating cancer if we could prevent it, if we could reduce the exposures to environmental pollution, not just for some communities, but for all communities. What we need is systemic change. We need to turn off the plastic tap that is running from communities in Texas and Louisiana and Appalachia at their expense into our state. The Packaging Reduction and Recycling Infrastructure Act will have a real impact on setting the tone for single-use plastics reduction in the country, which accounts for 44% of all plastic production. And the industry knows this. They know that New York is the first domino, and that is why they are throwing everything they have at this bill to try and kill it. But we're going to call our legislators today, and we're going to tell them to listen to the voices of the prophets who are telling us the truth of this industry and not to the voice of the profiteers. So don't let the chemical industry lobbyists in Albany divide us in order to maintain a system of sickness and of ecological destruction that is killing us.
Thank you so much, Catherine, for calling it out and for your spiritual leadership. It's just reassuring to hear that there is a moral obligation for us to stand up and fight for the vulnerable. Let's take a moment to make some phone calls. I would love if your last name starts with let's go through A through M. Call your own assembly member now. I think you can scroll through the carousel. And if your last name starts after M, LMNO, start O through Z, you can, let's do O through T. I don't know. I don't have it in front of me. Call assembly member Solage. and then everyone else call Hasty. And that's just so we don't jam up the phone lines. So let's just take 3 minutes right now to make phone calls real quick.
Yeah. And just a quick note, so if you're in the app, if you scroll towards the end of the action carousel, that's where you can find all of the calls. But for the rest of you, I'm going to be putting up a slide with all of the call scripts. I do have one for Pretlo up there. Just ignore that one and follow Alexis's instructions for getting in touch with the rest. I'll also put a link in the chat so that you can find your assembly member and their contact information.
Thanks so much, Kaylee, for putting that up there. And maybe Alexis, and anyone else from our panel, while folks are getting ready to make calls, if there's anyone out there who's feeling sort of nervous to make a phone call, maybe they haven't done this before, do you have any advice or perspective that you'd like to share with folks about what this is like as an experience?
You have the power. And if it's scary, it's not. Just literally type in the number and let it ring, and then all you have to do is read the script, and that's it. And nothing bad is going to happen to you.
I've heard you say before, Alexis, that it's you're calling people whose job it is to listen. So this is really what they're getting paid to do, what their business hours are intended for. So it's a great time for you guys to be able to just make sure those folks are hearing from you.
And feel free to report your calls in the chat. Let us know what people said.
Also, Alexis, I know we did hit 500 a little bit ago. So do you have a story you could share with the folks on the call?
I do, but I'm going to wait until after the phone calls so that
Okay.
people can hear it.
Okay, sounds good.
All right. If your assembly member is a co-sponsor, yes, it's worth calling them, but urge them to talk to Hasty to get this bill to the floor. And they'll probably say, I'll talk to Glick, but that's not good enough. They need to talk to Hasty. Also, if they're a member of the Black, Hispanic, Puerto Rican, and Asian American caucus, they should talk to Solage. All right, so we'll come back to phone calls. Everybody needs to make these 4 calls before we adjourn today. So I'll pass it to Thea, but as promised, I'll tell you an embarrassing story. So before I joined Beyond Plastics, I worked for a radio station in Troy, New York. I was doing community journalism, and I would go to the Capitol and interview members about this or that bill or the budget. And one day, a prominent senator who's an ally of ours was having a press conference. I'll just tell you, it was Liz Kruger. She didn't do anything wrong, but this is funny. And she had a press conference, and I interviewed her afterward. I had a little hand microphone, and she talked to me for 10 minutes. And as we were concluding the interview, I looked down, I don't even remember what it was about. I think it was about the CLCPA, the climate law. And I looked down at my recorder and I didn't press record. And I was like, oh no. And I said, I'm sorry, Senator. I forgot to hit record. Can we do that again? And she just looked at me. She didn't say anything and she turned around and walked away. I was so embarrassed, but it's an easy mistake, and I've made a lot of mistakes in this job. We're not perfect, and nobody's perfect. It's important to know that things are going to slip through the cracks, but just try not to make it the big things that slip through the cracks. All right, so without further ado, Liz, if you could introduce Thea.
Awesome. Thanks for this story, Alexis. Nobody's perfect, right? All right. So we're going to hear now from Reverend Thea Reggio. Thea Reggio serves as pastor of the Second Presbyterian Church of the City of New York and on the advisory board of the Center for Earth Ethics. After more than 20 years as a process and communications consultant to Fortune 500 companies, government agencies, and nonprofit organizations, Reverend Reggio heeded the call to seminary and the ministry, graduating from Union Seminary with a Master of Divinity in 2012 and a Master of Sacred Theology and Christianity in a multi-religious context in 2013. Reverend Reggio is a seasoned community organizer and a disaster response coordinator. Let's hear from you now, Reverend Reggio, and thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much, Liz and Alexis and everyone. Catherine spoke so eloquently about our tradition and what brings us into this work. And as the name would suggest, in the Center for Earth Ethics, we're really concerned with the ethical component of this work to be kind and constructive and to partner with the earth in the way that we are intended to do. We are not separate. And I think that is a big theme, both of this work and of the conversation that we're having, is to remember the interconnection. And if this particular issue, this issue of plastics and the effect that it has been proven to have now, that this overuse of particularly single-use plastic, is that we are all connected, and that means not only that the consequences are shared, as we're hearing, but that the responsibility is shared. And in that is some hopefulness and some opportunity for us to be together in the way that we are here, seeing other people who also care, and conveying that is such a big piece of the way that this healing work for the earth will happen, because we're not in it alone. And Catherine held up um, the prophets who really just looked at the situation in front of them and saw the logical conclusion where it was going to go. And often these are the folks on the front lines, like the folks in Long Island, but there are more and more of these communities, or perhaps the awareness within the communities is greater and greater. So one of the stories from the work that I have done in disaster recovery is after we had Superstorm Sandy here in New York City area and around, we discovered immediately that the most vulnerable communities were the ones most strongly impacted for a variety of reasons. But over the course of the time that I was working with Sandy, I got called into other related conversations. And then Flint happened and the water situation happened. And then shortly thereafter, a little town on the border of Vermont and New York, not far from Bennington College, where Beyond Plastics is housed, Hoosick Falls, discovered that they had a significant problem with plastics. And this is unique because this is a rural community, predominantly white community in this case, and they relied on well water. So their identity with who they were and how they were interacting with the environment and the earth and their water, it was shocking to them to discover that these, pure sources of water had been infiltrated by plastics from and chemicals from a company that was producing them in their backyards. So the more that we understand that these situations, so Flint and Hoosick Falls, both dealing with water, different issues, but connected, this is the environment we are now in. And we need to stop things where they are now and reverse. And we can. And as you've heard Alexis say, and Catherine also say, there are always voices saying, oh, we can't. This must continue. And those are false prophets. Those are not true things. Of course, there is always a way to change, particularly in an industry that didn't have this breadth in the past. So there are solutions, there are viable solutions, they're being used. You all have reached 1,000, more than 1,000 actions. That is so cool. And you see what I mean? Like we all sit and worry about what can we do? How can we make a difference? This is how we can do it. And having these conversations, bringing more and more people into them, that helping them not to feel isolated and not to feel afraid. We were talking earlier about the fact that those of us who do feel a moral and ethical obligation often think that it's all on us. If we just do a good enough job recycling, if we just are conscious enough about what we purchase, this is the opportunity to shift the spotlight to the source and say, yes, all of the actions we take are important. And there is a responsibility for those who are profiteering off of human health, human life, and the life of this planet to make the adjustments that are necessary for us all to be healthier and to respond to one another as a real connected community. So that's what I hope that we are all here about, and that you'll continue to have conversations like this one, and to know that individually you are important and you don't exist in a vacuum. You are a part of a larger community that is all connected down to the micro level. So that's what I wanted to bring this message today, and I'll turn it back to you all if we are going to move on to the next phase.
Wow, thank you so much, Reverend Thea, for those wise words and for reassuring us that we're all connected and we don't have to do this fight alone, because it does feel like such a big fight sometimes, especially with all the other things going on in the world. It can feel really overwhelming, but we're in it together, and it's good to be reminded of that. Great job making it to 1,000 actions, everyone. I will make good on my promise, but first let's go back to phone calls, because I want to make sure we do all 4 of these phone calls before we adjourn. So if we could have the scripts up again, let's take 5 minutes to do more phone calls. Please just do them in random order. because we can't have 60 people calling one number at the same time. All right, so we'll go till 12:45 for calls, and then I'll tell a story. Then we'll do questions. Oh, and feel free to mix up the scripts, make it personal to you, but the key is urging, Pretlow to bring it to the committee agenda, urging Hasty to bring it to the floor. I thought we weren't calling Pretlow, but I was mistaken. We went back and forth, but we are calling Pretlow. I apologize. And again, if you're calling your members, urge them to talk to Hasty to bring this to the floor. If they're members of the caucus, urge them to speak up in the caucus.
And Alexis, we've got a question from Mark asking, according to OpenAI, Ways and Means is the last stop before a floor vote. True or false? Could you share a little bit about that for Mark?
Sort of. It would have to it has to go through rules, but if it gets on the rules agenda, that means it's going to a floor vote. So it's kind of one and the same. Well, it doesn't necessarily mean it because it was on rules last year and then it didn't make it to the floor because we ran out of time. But the key difference here is that the smaller committees close down before session ends. So like NCON, I think their last meeting was this week. So you want to clear those committees before they close down, but rules, they can meet every day.
And for anyone who's looking for their contact information for their own assembly member, Kaylee has just dropped a link into the chat. You just have to click that, enter your street address, and that will help give you the contact info you need.
Yeah, and I know there's been a little bit of confusion with the action carousel. So if you're in the app, all you need to do is basically swipe through all the actions, and at the end of your carousel, there will be 4 or 5 call actions you can take. So if you want to make your calls in the app so it counts to the goal tracker, that's how you can find them in the carousel.
We've got some good insight from Brody as well, saying that when they called the People's Stokes office, but they've been hearing the same call. So if anyone has a specific personal anecdote or story they want to share when they call, definitely feel free to add those in. Any sort of personalization you want to bring into this is definitely welcomed and can be really helpful.
I can't say what exactly is holding it up in Ways and Means per the question in the chat, but I think that it is the industry dividing the Black Hispanic caucus. Pretlow is a member of that caucus, and I'm sure he's being heavily lobbied. We do have the votes in Ways and Means to pass it out of committee. We have to convince Hasty we have the votes to pass it on the floor. We are asking Pretlow to stand up for environmental justice and support the Packaging Reduction and Recycling Infrastructure Act. Also, it's very important to say the bill numbers because the industry bill sometimes gets confused with this bill. So say the bill numbers and say that it's sponsored by Assemblymember Glick. All right, maybe one more minute to finish these calls and then keep making the calls. I'm sure they're getting inundated with calls right now. Awesome job, Barbara. Thank you. Okay, so as promised, I'll tell another story. This one's from last year when I was working on the bottle bill. Um, I work on both bills, the packaging bill and the bottle bill, and I meet a lot with assembly members, as you know, and I talk to their staff a lot. And some staff can be prickly, especially about just being approached without an appointment. And there was one particular staffer that I needed to talk to, and I knew that this staffer did not like to be did not just like walking people walking into their office. They wanted heads up and to make an appointment. So I happened to be in Albany for a screening that we were doing of We Are All Plastic People Now for the legislature, and something came up on the bottle bill and I wanted to go talk to this staffer about it. So I had their cell phone number because I talked to them so much, and I texted the staffer and said, hey, can I come by your office to talk about, I don't even remember what it was. They didn't answer. A couple hours went by and I thought, okay, well, I'll just go knock on their door and, just see if I can drop in because I'm already here. So I just went to the elevator of the LOB, went to their floor, walked over to their office. I'm walking down the hall. I see the office doors open. I'm walking up to the door, and what did I hear? I heard the staffer talking to an intern, and their office isn't right inside the door. It's off, but there's another door inside. There's the foyer where the interns sit, and then there's the office. So the intern was standing in the door to the staffer's room, and I heard the staffer reading my text message out loud. And then they shouted, "No, go away!" Shouted it. And I was right inside the door. They didn't see me. And I was oh, I just turned around and I hightailed it out of there because it was very clear that they didn't want to talk to me. And I was really embarrassed. And the first thing I did was call my mom. But this staffer, I'm sure it was not personal. It was just, they were probably just having a bad day and getting inundated. They're inundated constantly with lobbyists, probably so often that they cannot even do their job sometimes. So I didn't take it personally, but it was still rather embarrassing. And I've never forgotten it. So if we could put our speakers back here on the screen, we can take any questions for Catherine and Thea. I'm not going to haunt them. There's nothing to forgive. We all have bad days. And I'm sure they never would have said that if they knew I was standing there. And you know how it is when you're frustrated and venting and you're having a day. It wasn't personal, but it was embarrassing. Glad everyone's making their 4 calls. Thank you. I'm so glad to hear Liz had a long conversation with Hasty's office. Yeah, they're passing the buck. Hasty's saying it's up to Pretlow. Pretlow's saying it's up to Hasty. Stokes is saying it's up to Hasty. Who's running the ship here? They need to get it to the floor. Thank you all for calling. Yes, it is like saying ask your dad and ask your mom. So any questions for our speakers, or are people just taking action, or any comments here for our speakers, from our speakers?
I can kick us off with a question for our speakers. And if anyone has specific questions you're really curious to hear about from this panel, please do share those in the chat. We can get to those. I'm really curious, Reverend Reggio and Reverend Bilkey, based on both of your experiences working in this field, um, what lessons from interfaith dialogue conversations that you've had have shaped your experience working on plastic pollution and the environment in general?
The first thing that came to my mind is listening. The big lesson is listen. And you will invariably hear stories, and the more you allow people to tell their story, and then as you do more work, you can remember a story from, like what Alexis is doing. You remember the stories and you start to connect the stories. But I feel like that posture of listening to folks is the most helpful thing, because it allows you to and then to know where they are, and where, as opposed to coming in always with your own information or your own story first. It's helpful to know the ground that you're standing on.
Mhm. Definitely so important to listen, and I can feel like both of you are experts in that. So thanks so much for being here today to share with us and let us listen to you and learn from you as well. Reverend Bilkey, anything you'd like to add to that question as well?
Yeah, I mean, I second what you said, Thea, and from that, posture of um, listening and also presence, being with and setting a table where a diverse voices are represented. I've learned in this work the common themes amongst many traditions that support not only environmental advocacy more broadly, but just our relationship with one another and the earth, and that theme of interconnectedness that Thea spoke to earlier. You know, Traditions have different names uh, for that. Ubuntu is one, kinship or interbeing, that um, we're all part of a web of life together, and we thus have responsibilities to one another, is a theme in many traditions. And in ours, in our very creation story, God forms us from the very soil of the earth. And in the creation story in Genesis, it's the human, the Adam, is created from the Adamah, the soil of the earth. So that interconnection, that we are not separate from the earth, but we are part of the earth. What happens to the earth thus happens to us. And it is happening, again, to frontline communities more rapidly. Uh, those interconnections, I think, is the grounding for this work to approach it in a interfaith and even interdisciplinary way.
I love that. Can I tap in just to that, what Catherine so beautifully brought up, and then you can connect the science, because the science will tell you that the substance in human beings and the earth and the stars, for that matter, is all at its core the same. It is the same. It's not that, and the beauty of these traditions is that wisdom transcends what science happens to be available at the time. I think a lot of people struggle with, certainly, people of generations where plastics started to come on, and it was so heavily sold as a convenience, and, safety, and all of these things that were promoted. And we tend to think, oh, whatever is coming next out of humanity is the better thing. And this is just a reminder to come back to that root and the core, because we'll always find at that essence we're connected.
I'm curious, for both of our speakers. Thinking about these long-term sort of connections and interconnectedness to what people might feel grounded in the full scope of their lives and connecting that to these really urgent environmental issues that are so timely. How do you help people find balance in having the space to be connected to feeling peaceful and calm in the long run, full scope of their lives, but also making space to show up and take action on these really urgent and sometimes very stressful environmental issues?
Not being alone is what I take most comfort in spiritually. Not only am I not alone because I have a higher power grounding me and guiding me, but we're not alone because we have community and we have everyone on this call, all part of the same, who have the same heart for this cause. And the work, therefore, is not up to me entirely. It's not resting entirely on any of our shoulders. But when we need to find balance, we pass the baton to someone else. And so I think that's what helps me personally.
Yeah, that definitely resonates, that sense of not being alone. And, you know, in New York yesterday, we got some of the smoke from the Canadian wildfires, and that phenomenon too, the wildfires and the way that we are breathing the same air and the air moves around the planet, and those things are all connected. I want to invite folks to think also of what we bring into and put out into the world as having similar effect. So like joy, for example. When we're engaged in this kind of work, a lot of the time we feel that we must always be very serious, or that somehow the joy robs from the seriousness, as though it's a zero-sum game. But bringing joy into the world, bringing fun and laughter, and the way that Alexis is interjecting these stories that we'll remember and relate to, that's also life-giving, and there's more than enough room for it. So I just want to invite folks not to always have to feel that they have to be sad or upset or angry, but also you can let the joy come through and in little things.
I love that. I think that's such a lovely note for us to wrap up on, is that sentiment of how we're allowed to bring joy into these spaces and we're allowed to have joy as we go through the process of taking action and being in community together to do it. So I want to share a big thanks to both of our wonderful speakers for joining us today to share their time and their insights with us during this action party, which is indeed a party where we are allowed to have joy. And a massive thanks as well to Alexis Goldsmith, the just incredible bedrock of this organizing effort and all the work you're doing. Alexis, any final thoughts you'd like to share with everyone who's on the call here today?
Just finish the actions, and then I have a request from Judith directly, and that is please ask 5 of your friends and family to call their assembly members. Taking action is the first step, and then the next step is getting others to take action. So you could share this campaign with them, the app with them, and tell them how important it is. You could just ask them to call their assembly member and give them the call script. Up to you, but I encourage everyone to reach out to 5 people. This is actually your homework, not just encouragement. Ask 5 people to call their assembly members.
And I quickly want to say a big thank you to everyone here who participated and took action, because we reached our goal, 4 different times? We made it to 1,266 actions. So you're all amazing. Thanks for being here and spreading some good energy in the chat, and just being part of this effort. We really appreciate you and your participation.
Yes, everyone who showed up here today is truly the backbone of what makes all of this work. So thank you for taking time out of your busy lives. And if this was your lunch break, I hope you had a chance to eat your lunch off camera at the same time. The Climate Action Now team has just dropped a couple links into the chat for your consideration. If you have enjoyed this type of action party structure where you get to come together with folks and take action while learning from people who are experts in their fields, we've got lots more where that came from. So feel free to check out those links if you'd like to come back for future events. We've just hit the top of the hour, so that brings us to the end of this action party. For our panel, if you would like to join us for our debrief session in the breakout room, we'll head over there now. For everyone else, we'll send out a recording of this action party tomorrow, as well as some follow-up resources, including links to the action carousel, so you can continue to make those calls and send those emails. Thank you so much for being here today, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.